The oak-paneled boardroom hadn't changed since 1993, but everything else had. At the far end of the long, gleaming table sat a woman no one in the family had taken seriously in over a decade. Her name was Emily Prescott, though around family gatherings, she was usually just the one who left. At just 33, Emily had become the black sheep of the powerful Prescott family, after walking away from her inheritance and refusing a cushy executive title at Prescott Industries. They said she was reckless, trading her birthright for some fantasy in Silicon Valley. No one at that table had imagined she'd amount to anything beyond a failed startup founder, and certainly not someone worth listening to. But what the family didn't know that day, what made this meeting far more than a financial check-in, was that Emily had returned. Not for approval, not for forgiveness. She'd come back as the new owner of the very company they'd said she was unfit to lead. They still saw her as the naive girl who turned down a corner office. What they didn't see was the strategist who had spent the last 5 years building Horizon Equity, a tech investment powerhouse that had quietly bought controlling interest in Prescott Industries right out from under them. Emily wasn't there to be accepted. She was there to take command. While her relatives were busy attending charity galas and polishing their titles, Emily Prescott was quietly rewriting her family's future, and they didn't even know it. 5 years earlier, after being dismissed and patronized by her own blood, Emily did the unthinkable. She turned down a high-ranking title at Prescott Industries. It had sounded impressive on paper, director of brand strategy, but in reality, it was nothing more than a symbolic seat, a keep-her-busy role with no real influence. They hoped it would pacify her long enough for her cousins to carry on their comfortable reign. Emily had other plans. With the inheritance she was supposed to squander, she instead founded Horizon Equity, a small but strategic private firm focused on rescuing struggling tech and logistics companies. At first, Horizon looked like just another boutique investment group headquartered in a shared co-working space downtown. That too was by design. Emily knew her family watched her hoping she'd fail, and she let them believe she was just playing business. Behind the scenes, though, she was doing something far more ambitious, acquiring the very companies Prescott Industries had either overlooked or deemed too low value. Her first big move was into logistics, a division her sister once called worthless. Emily saw potential in automation and AI-driven delivery models. Over time, Horizon began quietly purchasing controlling interest in firms linked to Prescott's supply chain. No one noticed. Not her cousins, not her Uncle Richard, who had taken over as CEO, and certainly not her father, who had retired into quiet disappointment after Emily rejected the family script. By the time they realized something was off, it was already too late. Through a web of discrete acquisitions, shell companies, and strategic partnerships, Horizon had become the single largest shareholder in Prescott Industries. It wasn't just a hostile takeover, it was a masterpiece of long-term strategy, and it had all happened under their noses while they laughed her out of family meetings and sipped cocktails at fundraising banquets. Emily didn't build Horizon to prove anyone wrong, though that part was sweet. She built it because she believed companies could be more than old money machines churning out dividends for disconnected heirs. She believed in transformation, in revitalizing outdated models, and in giving power to people with vision, not just legacy. Her tiny startup now occupied the top 3 floors of the Vanguard Tower in San Francisco, with clients stretching from Menlo Park to Singapore. Horizon was valued in the billions, and Emily Prescott, once the family outcast, was at its helm. She hadn't just survived. She'd thrived and done so with a level of precision the rest of the Prescotts couldn't begin to comprehend. Her father, when he finally learned the truth, could barely speak. The quiet, nerdy daughter who'd been brushed aside at board meetings had built an empire in plain sight. And now she didn't just own a seat at the table, she owned the table itself. As Emily prepared to enter the meeting that would shake her family's world, she reflected on everything that had led to this moment. The eye rolls, the backhanded compliments, the years of being told she didn't understand how business works. She had understood perfectly. That was the problem. What her family had labeled rebellion had actually been reinvention. And now the girl they once called worthless was walking into the boardroom, not with a pitch, but with the deed. The room still carried the scent of old cigars and entitlement. Portraits of past Prescott executives hung proudly on the walls, stern-faced men in tailored suits, each one believing their last name alone made them untouchable. Emily Prescott sat at the far end of the long walnut table, just like she always had when she was still the disappointment. To her right was her uncle Richard Prescott, now CEO in name, but largely out of touch. Next to him, her cousin Daniel, barely 30, fresh out of business school, and already a senior VP thanks to the family name. Across from them sat her sister Olivia, glued to a gold-plated tablet, throwing the occasional glance of indifference Emily's way. None of them suspected a thing. They'd called the emergency meeting to discuss a crisis, financial losses across every department, poor performance, and shrinking investor confidence. Richard grumbled about discipline, Daniel waved off the data with smug optimism, and Olivia suggested selling off the dead-weight logistics division. Emily almost laughed. That division, the one Olivia wanted to scrap, had already been restructured under Horizon Equity, her company. It had been reborn with AI smart delivery systems and predictive analytics that had Silicon Valley quietly knocking at her door. But she kept quiet, for now. As they squabbled and postured, Emily remained calm, offering a few comments here and there. Her uncle scoffed at her suggestions, throwing in another jab about how she'd walked away from the family trust to play CEO in some garage. Daniel laughed and reminded her this wasn't some app launch, it was Prescott Industries, a billion-dollar legacy, and she had no place in it. But the clock was ticking, quite literally. At that very moment, legal paperwork was processing the final step of Horizon's acquisition. In under 3 minutes, Prescott Industries would officially become a subsidiary of Horizon Equity. Emily didn't need their approval. She already had the votes, the stock, the control. Then came the moment everything changed. A knock at the boardroom door. Richard's assistant entered pale and shaken. "Sir, you need to take this call. It's from the board. Horizon Equity has just acquired controlling interest in Prescott Industries." Silence fell like thunder. Daniel's designer pen clattered to the floor. Olivia's tablet slipped from her hand. Richard looked like he'd forgotten how to breathe, and Emily. She stood up slowly, straightened her blazer, and walked toward the conference screen. With a tap on her phone, she mirrored Horizon's website onto the wall. There it was in full color, her photo beneath the words, "Founder and CEO, the acquisition headline," and a map showing Horizon's international footprint. "That little startup," she said evenly, "was a front. While you were all laughing, I was building something world-class. It was over." In less than 10 minutes, the woman they'd dismissed as a flake had revealed herself as their new boss. A woman they hadn't just underestimated, they had ignored, belittled, and written off completely. "What happens now?" Olivia asked, her voice trembling. "We restructure," Emily said, from the top down. They had never taken her seriously. They'd never imagined she could pull something like this off. But that was the brilliance of it all. Emily didn't need their belief, just their blindness. She walked to the head of the table, the seat that had once belonged to her grandfather, then her uncle. She set down her laptop, opened a file labeled Operational Reform, and said calmly, "Let's begin." And for the first time in their lives, the Prescotts listened. You could have heard a pin drop. For years, Emily Prescott had been dismissed as the flighty niece who gave up everything to play entrepreneur. Now standing confidently at the front of the Prescott Industries boardroom, she had just revealed the truth. She wasn't just back. She owned them. It didn't sink in right away. Uncle Richard stood frozen, blinking, like he was waking from a bad dream. Olivia, Emily's sister, sat white-knuckled, clutching her tablet like it might offer a way out. And Daniel, always so smug, always so sure of his pedigree, just muttered, "That's impossible," like saying it might make it true. But there it was, on the screen behind Emily, the Horizon Equity logo, the acquisition announcement, and a bright, polished headshot of Emily herself, titled Founder and CEO. That little startup they had mocked, it was a front, a smokescreen designed to keep them comfortable, unthreatened and blind, while Emily built a global powerhouse from the ground up. "I thought you were working out of a co-working space downtown," Daniel stammered. "I was," Emily said coolly, "for appearances." Meanwhile, Horizon was expanding across 3 continents. Richard's face had turned a dangerous shade of red. "You can't do this. We're family." That word, family. It was the same word they'd used as a weapon when they denied her ideas, minimized her talent, and called her a disgrace. Emily gave a small, almost sad smile. "Was it family when you laughed behind my back? When you ignored every plan I brought forward? When you gave power to people based on their last name and not their qualifications?" The room remained silent. They had no answers, just shame and shock. Suddenly, her father, James Prescott, the once CEO, who had quietly stepped aside years earlier, stood from his corner seat. His eyes were heavy, full of emotion. "Emily," he said quietly, "we can fix this." Emily met his gaze, a lifetime of silence and disappointment between them. "I already did," she replied. At that moment, the corporate assistant stepped back into the room, holding a folder of press kits. "Ma'am, the media's calling. They want a statement about the acquisition." Richard sank back into his chair, completely defeated. "What am I supposed to say?" he muttered. "That my worthless niece just bought us out." Emily stepped forward, poised and unshaken. "Not worthless anymore, am I?" she said. "I'm your boss now." Gasps swept through the room. Olivia burst into tears. Daniel lunged for his phone, barking orders to legal counsel. But it was too late. The paperwork was clean, the shares were transferred, and Emily held majority ownership, and she wasn't finished. Walking slowly to the head of the table, the seat that had belonged to generations of Prescotts, Emily placed her laptop down and opened the restructuring plans. "This isn't personal," she said. "This is leadership." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. For years, they told her she wasn't Prescott material, that she didn't belong. But now, in the space they tried to keep her out of, she was in full command. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about proving them wrong. It was about building something better, something that didn't cling to legacy, but embraced change. By noon, the press release hit every major outlet. The stock surged 15% within minutes. Investors welcomed the shakeup. The industry hailed the bold move. And the family, they were left behind, stunned and speechless. They used to call her worthless. Now they had to call her CEO. By the time the family had processed what had happened, Emily Prescott was already shifting gears from revealing the truth to reshaping the future. The board meeting that followed was brief and decisive. Emily's controlling stake in Prescott Industries meant there was no vote to win, only policies to execute. She was no longer an outsider trying to get a word in. She was the boss, the one with the final say. With calm precision, she started where it hurt the most, the top. "We'll begin with leadership restructuring," she announced, her voice steady but firm. "Olivia, your role as Chief Innovation Officer is revoked. Daniel, your title as Vice President is terminated effective immediately." "You can't do that," Daniel protested, rising from his chair in disbelief. "We're Prescott's." "So am I," Emily replied. "And for the record, being a Prescott isn't a job qualification anymore." Their faces said everything. Entitlement was no longer currency, legacy no longer protected them, and nepotism that had just been fired. She turned to her legal team: "Prepare the termination paperwork and make sure security assists with office access changes by the end of the day." For years, Emily had sat in the shadows of those same relatives who were now scrambling to call their attorneys. But she hadn't come to make a scene. She'd come to rebuild something they'd been quietly destroying, one decision, one lazy policy, one inflated ego at a time. Her first major order of business was to overhaul the logistics division, the one Olivia had wanted to sell for scraps. Under Horizon's direction, it had already begun integrating AI systems and predictive analytics. Now Emily was investing even more. "This division will be the cornerstone of our new strategy," she said, highlighting projected growth models and early investor interest. "You called it worthless, but it's already outperforming your so-called core divisions." Her tone was calm, but every word cut deeper than anger ever could. And then came the audits. Emily brought in external auditors and forensic accountants to peel back every layer of dysfunction that had been ignored for decades. Personal golf club memberships charged as business development, lavish expense reports labeled as client outreach, and fake consulting contracts handed to friends of the family, all of it came to light. Uncle Richard, pale and silent, watched as his empire began to crumble. His voice trembled as he tried to justify the past. "It's just how we've always done it. And that's exactly why it had to change," Emily said. She didn't gloat. She didn't raise her voice. Her power came from disciplined strategy and the calm confidence of someone who no longer needed validation. What shocked everyone most wasn't her authority. It was her clarity. Every department had a reform plan. Every executive was reassessed based on performance, not bloodline. Within days, new teams were in place, young, diverse, forward-thinking leaders who had been overlooked for years in favor of familiar last names. The old Prescott culture of privilege was being dismantled brick by brick, and Emily wasn't apologizing for it. She wasn't there to comfort their bruised egos. She was there to fix the mess they had buried under tradition and denial. As she reviewed the updated strategy in her corner office, formerly Daniel's, Emily didn't feel vindicated. She felt responsible for the company's survival, for its future. They used to laugh when she talked about innovation. Now they were updating their resumes. This wasn't just a change in leadership. It was a change in values. And for the first time in a long time, Prescott Industries was no longer a family business. It was a real business. Once the press release went live, and Emily Prescott was officially named CEO of Prescott Industries, the story dominating headlines wasn't just the shock of a family buyout. It was what she uncovered next. Almost immediately, Emily authorized a full audit, something the previous leadership had long avoided. A neutral outside team of forensic accountants and compliance experts were brought in under strict confidentiality. What they found wasn't just poor management. It was corruption, deep, deliberate, and staggering. Uncle Richard, the longtime CEO and face of the company, had been siphoning money into private shell companies for years. Lavish business retreats turned out to be personal vacations. Corporate accounts funded everything from golf memberships to a personal yacht registered under a false name. The numbers were undeniable. Millions gone, vanished under bogus expense lines labeled strategic development. Cousin Olivia, once so smug in her role as Chief Innovation Officer, had padded the payroll with friends posing as consultants. Most of them had never even logged into the company network. A few had criminal records. All were overpaid and underqualified. Daniel's offense was more dangerous insider trading. Using information from board meetings, he had been quietly trading Prescott stock for years, tipping off friends and manipulating share prices for personal gain. What he didn't realize was that Horizon Equity Emily's firm had begun monitoring trading patterns long before the acquisition. One by one, the layers peeled back, and so did the family's last defense silence. Emily didn't relish the takedown, but she didn't hesitate either. Report everything she told her legal team. Full transparency, no deals, no cover-ups. The SEC will want a word, her chief compliance officer warned. Then give them everything, Emily said firmly. By the end of the week, subpoenas were issued. Richard was indicted for embezzlement and fraud. Olivia and Daniel were both permanently barred from serving as officers or directors at any public company. The Prescott name, once a symbol of generational power, was now trending for all the wrong reasons. Headlines splashed across business news sites. Family dynasty falls under weight of scandal. The worthless niece. Turned whistleblower CEO, Prescott Industries reborn under new leadership. Emily's father, James, who had once looked away to keep peace in the family, sat quietly in his advisor role, more a figurehead than anything else now. One evening, after another round of damage reports came in, he finally asked, "Do you think they'll go to prison?" Emily didn't flinch. "They made their choices," she replied. Just like they chose to call me worthless. She hadn't come back to destroy her family, but she also wasn't going to protect what was broken just because it carried their name. For too long, Prescott Industries had been run like a private club, wealth passed down, responsibility passed over. Now, under Emily's leadership, everything was being documented. Every fake invoice, every shadow transaction, every debt hidden under a strategic initiative. The fallout was massive. Richard's assets were frozen. Olivia listed her penthouse for sale. Daniel returned to live in his childhood bedroom while under investigation. What they had taken for granted was gone, and the empire they thought was untouchable was now in full collapse. But amid the chaos, Horizon and Prescott Industries thrived. Investors saw what Emily had known all along behind. The arrogance was untapped potential. The company didn't need a new name. It needed a new standard. With clean books, strong leadership, and actual innovation leading the way, the stock doubled in just over a month. It wasn't just reform, it was reckoning. And Emily Prescott wasn't done. She was just getting started. 6 months after the takeover, Emily Prescott sat in her new office, once Daniel's, now redesigned with light glass and quiet purpose. The company her family said she'd never understand was thriving under her leadership. The dusty logo of the old Prescott empire had been replaced. The culture had shifted from entitlement to innovation, from inheritance to integrity. But more than turning the business around, Emily had redefined something much deeper worth. For years, her family told her that she didn't fit, that by not following the script, marrying the right person, taking the right job, staying silent, she had thrown it all away. But Emily didn't throw anything away. She chose. She chose to bet on herself, to take the long way, the harder way, and to build something that was hers, not handed down, not borrowed, earned. And in doing so, she proved something that resonates far beyond boardrooms. Your value isn't written by your family tree, your resume, or what others decide you're worth. It's defined by what you build when no one believes in you. Legacy isn't about what you inherit. It's about what you choose to create. If Emily's story spoke to something inside you, if you've ever been dismissed, underestimated, or called not enough, I'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below. What moment made you reclaim your voice? Subscribe if you're ready to rewrite your own story. Together, let's build a community of quiet strength, bold decisions, and second acts worth celebrating. You're not done. You're just getting started.